Welcome back to the second hour of the Big Money Show. I'm Dagan McDowell, along with my wonderful co-host, and joining us for this hour, Sidekick Operators President Chris Valletta. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
Israel and Iran continuing to trade heavy fire. The conflict now in its 8th day. And President Trump giving Tehran a new deadline. He says he will make a decision on striking Iran within the next 2 weeks. That announcement renewing hope for diplomacy. Here's White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
The president is always interested in a diplomatic solution to the problems and the global conflicts in this world. Again, he is a peacemaker in chief. He is the peace through strength president. And so if there's a chance for diplomacy, the president's always going to grab it. But he's not afraid to use strength as well.
Chris, from where you sit, what are you most concerned about, or what are you watching?
Well, this 2 week period reminded me of a time years ago. I had an opportunity to fly out of Norfolk, Virginia, on a C-2 Greyhound to land on the USS Theodore Roosevelt, and I spent a couple days on the ship at sea. It was incredible. Throughout the ship, displayed on the walls, was the famous quote from President Roosevelt: "Speak softly and carry a big stick." And I think right now the overwhelming majority of Americans, agree that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon.
Yes.
I think it's over 80%. But only 16% of the population agrees that we need to get involved in a conflict. So I think right now, clearly President Trump is playing the Roosevelt strategy, speaking softly, negotiating, and carrying that big stick. And hopefully our negotiator in chief can pull it off. I'm confident he can. The main question I still have, and Dagan, you've talked about this, is assuming we get through this without having to get involved in a conflict, what happens to this enriched uranium anyway? Who gets a hold of it? Where does it go? Does it fall into the wrong hands? That's what I'm most concerned with.
Based on people I've talked to on the air and off the air, that there would have to be boots on the ground to say Fodor is bombed with U.S. The bunker busters. There would be boots on the ground to retrieve that enriched uranium. I'm not saying necessarily U.S. boots, but many people have said likely U.S. boots to retrieve that enriched uranium. There's 16,000 centrifuges just at Fordo. But there are just so many, because President Trump has stayed away from the idea of regime change. And that also, Jackie, would open up, if it just happened to occur, it opens up another troubling scenario. And Dan Hoffman talked about it, but also the Journal writes about it, that Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard is poised for more power, or full power, if, say, the Ayatollah, the supreme leader, was removed.
Absolutely. And they have a lot of traction, not just in that country, but within the entire region. And I think that's part of President Trump's calculus to think about that. The notion of U.S. boots on the ground, even to retrieve that uranium, creates a very complicated web of what happens next if that is the step. The former Crown Prince of Iran, exiled Crown Prince, was on yesterday. This is what he had to say about regime change.
The regime is so desperate that it's now taking this initiative to, impede on the process. But I know we will overcome this. It's a big challenge, and my compatriots are extremely resilient, and we need that courage and that moral support that the world needs to also give us, that this time they're going to be on our side rather than continue thinking that this regime will ever provide a solution.
He has been calling for the Iranian people to rise up for the last quarter of a century, and this just might be their opportunity. I can't forecast what's going to happen with boots on the ground, bunker busters, what President Trump is going to do, what he needs to do. But this might be a chance for the people to finally buck this regime. It's interesting because he's talking about being resilient. He's talking about Western support. Larry yesterday mentioned this diaspora of Iranians who came to the United States who were very capable. Many of them were very wealthy. They left businesses behind in Iran. The extreme mullahs were trying to court them to get back there, to restart their businesses. They wouldn't do it. But these are a group of people who, if there was regime change and there was an opportunity to go back and rebuild the country, would definitely be open to offering that kind of assistance. I've talked about this time and time again, how my mother came here. She hasn't been home in over 50 years. There are a lot of people here who would love to see the end of this oppressive regime, have the people do it, take it over themselves, and try their hands at some sort of a democracy. The risk is you don't know what you're going to get if you do that. But I got to imagine that some of the options are going to be better than what they have now.
Brian?
Well, you mentioned Dan Hoffman earlier. He was on the news channel today. I was really struck by something he said, because this has been the conversation we're having right now is really dominated by B-2 bombers, bunker busters, and Fordo. And he said something that we actually brought up in the show earlier, but he reminded me of this, and he said it more effectively. But he said Israel, his words were, Israel has things on the shelf, their own plans to deal with Fordo. In other words, they didn't walk into this without any option for what they need to do except, U.S. B-2s and bombs. There's no way they can do that. And I just think that's really important to keep in mind in this moment, because it's so easy to jump to what's going to happen next, and you immediately start talking about U.S. and how we're going to be involved. And then the regime change conversation started in how many days? Yeah. Like 2 days? And I've been so impressed. The reason I bring it up is because I have been so impressed with the way that President Trump has operated within the framework he's created. So the framework that everyone's talking within now is strength, clear lines, but no nation building. Okay, that's kind of the way people are thinking about this. That is a Trump-created framework for foreign policy. And as many people as want to pull him out of that one way or the other, by talking about regime change on one hand, or by saying we shouldn't be involved on the other hand, he has stayed right in the middle of that framework, and he continues to do it. And I just think it takes a tremendous amount of discipline in this moment with all the voices to do what he's doing. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's the most remarkable part of what he's done, is complete discipline on how he's operating here. I
used the word measured approach yesterday. Mm-hmm. And this is a side note, Taylor, and you can talk about whatever you'd like, but I picked up the New York Times article, U.S. spy agencies assess Iran remains undecided on building a bomb. U.S. intelligence officials told the New York Times Iran was likely to pivot toward producing a nuclear weapon if the U.S. attacked a main uranium enrichment site or if Israel killed its supreme leader. And I thought to myself, and this is the distrust that's built in America by by the media's own making, the regime media's own making over the last several years. And I thought, do I believe the New York Times? The same Russia collusion hoax peddlers, the same newspaper. I mean, I could go on and on, but the same newspaper that just ignored the fact that the nation was run by a cognitively impaired, decrepit. Oh, actually, it wasn't run by a cognitively impaired man. It was run by a bunch of people who we still don't know who were making the decisions, but no curiosity about Joe Biden whatsoever. So that's the danger of the distrust and the mistrust that the New York Times and all the media minions sowed in recent years.
Well, you're bringing up a good point, and I'll sort of pick up on that about another report I was reading about a wide margin of error that we're looking at right now in terms of if the U.S. decides to get involved, how, when, how strong, what's required. Basically, the the International, Atomic Bomb Agency has been looking at satellite images, which show that all of these atomic installations have only really been grazed after 4 days. The Natanz location that we've talked about the damage was limited to electricity switch yards and transformers based on pictures as of June 17. Those installations can be repaired within a couple months. So, a former inspector at the International Atomic Energy Agency who previously ran one of the U.S. government's satellite imagery systems said they did a lot of damage, but frankly, there's still a lot left intact. So the question remains, if we get involved, again, how long and how extensive does this need to be? There were other reports that an alleged Israeli attack on that site back in 2021 did some damage, but again, it was repaired within months. So this looks maybe by some satellite images, and we're still getting them because we've only gotten ones as of 3 days ago, and we'll get more in the days to come. How much damage, if any, especially if they're hunkered down 100 feet underground, does this, and is this then going to be a delayed conflict if the damage so far hasn't even really touched the surface in terms of totally disarming Iran from ever be able to have a nuclear weapon? So I think as U.S. officials think about how they get involved, the headline that stuck out to me is wide margin of error, because we just aren't actually really even sure, I think, the extent of what the damage has been so far.
Yeah.
I think Israel has pretty good intelligence. I think they know more than we know, for sure, with respect to what's being, talked about. Yeah. But I think they've been pretty targeted and precise. Yeah.
You're looking at Tesla? Tell me.
This is a really fun story. Okay, so did you guys get the invitation in your inbox this morning? The exclusive robo-taxi event on Sunday in Austin. Invites went out on Sunday. Tesla's launching. No one got it. I didn't either. Don't worry. Okay. But a few email messages did go out if you were invited to that event on Sunday. And then Dan Ives over at Wedbush has really sort of been a permabull on Tesla for a very long time. Thinks that this is the path forward, the robo-taxi, not the car to $1 trillion market cap. And then he thinks a $2 trillion market cap for Tesla comes in 12 to 18 months. Again, assuming the success of this robo-taxis and these cyber cabs continue to be strong.
So you get an email saying, come ride in our taxi
An
in Austin?
exclusive invite was sent out this morning, I hear. I was not
sent one to me because they knew I wouldn't ride in it.
I thought you were a rider in that one. No, you're going to Mars, but you're not getting in a car.
I'm going to Mars.
Right. Got it.
Yeah, they would never invite me. I criticize everything. Sunny day. It's hot. Coming up, is China closing the gap in the race for AI dominance? White House AI czar David Sachs says we'd better be paranoid or pay the price. We'll break it all down next. Stay with big money.